We are going to start recording. Hello, everyone. We have everyone muted for the time being, just because it helps with being able to share information without hearing tapping and those kinds of things. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and we'll get back to you. We did just want to start out and let you know that all of the information regarding today's session has been saved in the SAS PLC. So hopefully you are all a member of the Gifted Professional Learning Community on SAS. And this is just a real quick reminder, if you're not a member, this you can go back to later. You just want to, let's see, choose the Teacher Tools option on the SAS homepage. Make sure you click on Teacher Tools. And once that pops up, you'll get a menu. In the middle, it says My Communities. You can click there, or you can click the My Communities tab at the top. And then it will give you an opportunity to search if you are not a member of the community. So in the keyword search, if you type in Gifted Education, you can see the name of the learning community is actually at the top, Gifted Education and Accelerated Learning Community. Once you look for that, you want to make sure that you join, okay, because unless you join, you won't be able to see all of the materials. You actually have to click on the link, Gifted Education and Accelerated Learning Community, and then a whole bunch of information will pop up. The information that we're referencing today can be found in the digital content repository, which is located at the very bottom of the page. There is a new folder called Gifted Education Compliance Monitoring Manual. All of the items in that folder are labeled as draft because they are being reviewed by all of the people, all the legal
and press and other people.
So the manual hasn't really been updated since 2008, and so there's some language changes that need to be fixed. And substantively, most of the information in there, especially the information that you're going to need to reference when you're reflecting on your school district, that's not going to change. What's basically going to change is some citations and grammar kinds of things. So we felt it was okay to include them in the draft form for today's purposes, but they should be ready shortly, and they will be posted on the SAS PLC when they are in final form, but they will also be posted on the PDE Gifted website. So, and they will be properly branded. So when they're on PDE's site, you know that they have finished their journey.
Yes.
So I am here today with Dr. Curl. We are going to walk you through the compliance monitoring for continuous improvement for gifted education process. And before we do that, a couple things that you should know. This is being recorded so that you can go back. We'll include the link for the recording in the SAS PLC when we're done. If you want to ask a question, you can choose the question option. You can also choose the chat button. So we will keep both of those items open during the session in case you want to ask a quick question. If you would like to talk, and we will give some time, we'll give some time at the end for us to just unmute everybody and just have a discussion. That way we can answer any questions we may not have addressed in the training. There will be an opportunity for that. So I think at this point I'm going to, unless I hear otherwise, you all can see my screen, the compliance monitoring, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Curl. Okay?
Hello, everyone. I'm glad that you are here for this go-to meeting, and First thing I want to say is I take compliance monitoring for continuous improvement very seriously. Especially the part about continuous improvement. I think the reason we do this is because we have a mission to improve services for our gifted students. There were a couple of monitorings done as pilots between 2006 and 2008. Compliance monitoring became mandated in 2008, and that's when I started to work with gifted education and gifted compliance monitoring and complaints. The reason we have compliance monitoring is, number one, it is state mandated. And it is through the Bureau of Special Education, of which I am a special education advisor for the Bureau of Special Ed. We do 10 or sometimes 11 a year. There are 10 cyclical monitorings in the 10 districts that were recently selected. Those are all cyclical monitorings. During some years, we also do a targeted monitoring, and those are selected separately when people are not doing what they're supposed to in terms of compliance. Any questions so far?
Looks good. Oh, go to the next screen.
The CMCI training is where we are today. We are doing the training today, and if you have any questions at any time, you can certainly email me or call me. And if you need any assistance, like as you're trying to complete these, gifted facilitated self-assessment, please contact me. That's one of the first things that you do, is complete the gifted facilitated self-assessment. That is then sent to me, and I would like to have it 1 week in advance of when I come on site with the team.
Sorry.
You and your school superintendent have already received the dates for the CMCI on-site visit. When I do come there, I will bring 2 other monitors. We call them peer monitors. I will be chairing the team, and after the monitoring is done, you will receive a report that will go to the superintendent, the director of special ed, if that person is responsible for gifted, or the gifted coordinator.
I just want to mention from a logistic standpoint, you'll see that there are several items located at the bottom of your screen in italicized, or in italics. Those documents are being referenced in the training. So, you know, if you want to know what the general schedule looks like, we're talking about it, but we have a file called the General Monitoring Schedule that will kind of give you the broad strokes of the whole process, as well as the gifted facilitated self-assessment, which Dr. Curl is going to refer to several times throughout this review. That's probably singularly the most important document that you will have to complete throughout this process. Okay.
In terms of, you will be receiving names that are randomly selected, and those names will come to you. We are trying to get those out early for the first monitoring, because that one is in early November. Generally, those names go out in October, and then you have the names of the children that are being reviewed, so you can begin the process. One of the more important things to do is to review those files before we arrive. Review them yourself and have your teacher of the gifted review them. The reason we like you to review those is it kind of acts as a staff development activity, because it makes your teachers aware of what we are looking for. And then if you look at the files that the teachers reviewed, you'd also see if they are having any difficulty in a particular area. And the GFSA, the Gifted Facilitated Self-Assessment, will be sent electronically, remember, 1 week before the site visit. In Gifted, we always have an entrance conference. And the entrance conference is what I like to think of as a reflection conference. We want you to think about, what are you doing good in gifted education, and what would you like to do better? So I'm going to ask you 2 questions focusing on those 2 things. And I want you to reflect on those things with other members of your team. It's a good idea to bring other people to the entrance conference. It could be principals, it could be your school counselor, it could be the psychologist, it could be the gifted teachers, your superintendent. You have a choice of who you bring to that entrance conference. And you can let them know ahead of time that I will be asking them what they think they are doing well in gifted education, and what's one thing that they would like to do better. That will give me an indication, and the other members of the team, an indication of gifted education services in your district. Instead of just looking at paperwork, we would first like to know more about your gifted education services. At that entrance conference, if you want to, you can create a PowerPoint, but you're not required to do that. I will be asking you those questions. That's all that's required. But if you have some things you want to brag about, we shall certainly listen to it. And we are also looking for commendations in your district. But we want you to be very upfront with us. And at that entrance conference, remember, you're not graded on any of this. We want you to just be very candid with us so that it gives us a picture of your district gifted ed services. On the first day, we will start reviewing the files after that entrance conference. We usually try to have the entrance conference at 9 o'clock. And all of the monitorings this year are on Tuesday and Wednesdays. In one district, they will have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But on the first day, we will start the file review. And after that, the second day, there will be a continuation of file reviews and interviews. Usually we finish the file reviews on the second day and get going on interviews, but it's different in each district. So we will ask that we will ask that you try to help us with interviews by letting the teachers know that we will be interviewing them, the gifted teachers, the regular ed teachers, letting the principal know that we will be interviewing students in their schools, and we would like some assistance with that, like having them, we don't want specific appointments because we never know the exact timing of this, but what we would like to have the kids lined up more or less for when we go over there, so that we don't have to wait long periods of time between interviews.
And there's multiple peer monitors, so it is conceivable that Dr. Curl could go to one building and another monitor could go to another building. Each monitoring team has at least 2, if not 3 monitors.
That is correct. And the parent interviews are done by telephone. And it is good to let the parents know so that they hopefully will answer the phone. And the parent interviews, some of them will be done in the daytime and some will be done in the evening. It's also a good idea to find out when is the most convenient time to interview the parent, whether they would rather be interviewed in the evening or in the daytime, whether or not they would prefer we call them at work or at home or on their cell phone. And there is a form for that. Special ed uses that form. I haven't used it in the past, but if you would like to use that, I will make sure that you get it. After the on-site, well, first of all, I wanted to talk about I forgot about the exit conference. We always have an exit conference. And the exit conference, for sure, I will be there. Frequently, the peer monitors are there. And you can bring whomever you want to that exit conference. Sometimes I meet just with the special ed director in charge of gifted. Sometimes I meet with the special ed director and the superintendent. Sometimes teachers have said, I want to be there because I want to hear what we need to do differently. But that's your call.
And that's general. The exit conference is very informal. There's nothing in writing. It's not the finalized report. It's really the initial observations of what the team has found after reviewing files and interviews and data.
Yes, it is tentative data. For one thing, I haven't gone through all of the paperwork yet at that point, but I do talk with the peer monitors and we discuss what they saw before the exit conference.
Okay.
After the on-site, within 60 days, your superintendent and the director of special ed or gifted coordinator will receive an executive summary report. In that report, it will tell what the commendations are, it will give a compilation of the file reviews in all the different areas, and there will also be a summary of findings a summary of findings from your district. The other part of it is you will receive a form that you're probably familiar with, and that is called the Corrective Action Verification Form. That lists in gray all the areas that were cited, and those are the areas that I will be looking at, and you will be making corrective action, and I will be coming back to develop a corrective action verification plan with you. And when I come back to develop the corrective action verification form, this is called the first visit. It's really not, but it's the first visit where we actually talk about what you were cited on, and then we talk about how you can make corrective actions so that you come clean with 100%. So it would be, for instance, you might be cited in the area of personnel because you did not do adequate staff development with your staff about gifted education. Or it might be dual exceptionalities because your students with dual exceptionalities did not have one document including all of the major components. Those are FSA items. And then also any of the items in the record review would also, if those are gray, those are what I would be looking at when I came back within a year after you have the opportunity to complete the corrective action.
I just want to say, and I usually say this in my training, you know, there is 1 year to complete the corrective action. But I know that Dr. Curl, if there are items that are not completed, you will continue to come back.
I will continue to come back. I will just keep continuing to come back if the corrective action is not completed. And I personally prefer that you try to, get the corrective action done before the year is up. It makes your life easier, and it makes my life easier. If you have the corrective action completed, and you have, all you have to have is those 10 files showing that the corrective action has been completed, and the documentation to show that you completed those FSA citations. If you have that done before a year is up, I ask that you call or email me, and I will find time to come over and close out. And it is important when you're looking at those those files that you review them ahead of time, because you have to have 100%. And it takes a lot of travel to get to some of these places, so I'm much happier if you get it done the first time. And anyway, that I would caution you that it makes your life easier too, to just say, okay, we're closed out, we're done. If you can do it in 6 months or 9 months, more power to you.
And that's kind of what you just talked about. Sorry, we didn't forward it. That's after the year.
And then after I review all of those things, then go to the next one.
No. We kind of go over the
Okay.
overview. Now we're going to go back into detail. So this kind of closes you out 1 year from that first visit, which is when Dr. Curl comes and reviews the corrective action verification form and you develop the plan. 1 year from that meeting is the expectation that you'll be closed out by then. And she just kind of talks you through what that includes, the 10 new files which you get to choose, and also any documentation that's not specific to a student file. For instance, something that we see a lot, we don't necessarily see policies regarding caseloads. So that's something that the school district might have to develop and have board approved. So if you're cited for that particular item, then you just simply need to, in your review, provide a copy of the board policy and when it was approved.
You may be asked to revise your screening and evaluation procedures. That is frequently a problem in a district, and that can be sent in ahead of time, or I can look at it when I come there. But those are the types of things that we also look at.
And now with the comprehensive plan, depending upon where your district is in terms of phases, the components that are in the gifted ed plan that were highlighted under Chapter 4 are the items that have been part of Chapter 16 all along since at least the 2008 revision. So those are 3 items that, should theoretically be in place. And they are, you've defined your screening and evaluation protocols, that you are providing professional development to all of the staff who come in contact with gifted students. And the third one is, that's very, very important, that you describe the continuum of services, what they look like as part of your gifted programming. Not a gifted program per se, but your overall district programming options for students based on their individual needs.
Like, what are your gifted education services? Do you provide pull-out classes, push-in classes, seminars,
what types of enrichment,
all
right?
Those things.
What types of enrichment, acceleration, or combination of both are you providing? So now let's go back. Before we go back, we're going to go back and talk about the individual components in much more detail, but this is kind of like the general overview, the pre, during, and post visit. And you have those dates for the most part. You at least have those weeks, if not those specific dates.
Everyone has the dates. Jim Thorpe had to change their date because of Veterans Day, but the rest of them are correct on the website.
Okay, so are there any questions about the general schedule before we move into some very more specific components of the compliance monitoring? Okay, seeing no hands, we're going to keep going. Some of this is a review, but it is,
The GFSA is what I review. I review it before I get there. That's why I wanted it a week ahead of time. But I don't have the evidence before I get there, and it's that evidence that is so important. And that's why as soon as I get there, I look at the GFSA. There in our GFSA, there are basically 6 sections that have to be reviewed. And you should have a file folder for each one of those with the evidence that supports what you said in the GFSA. So it's kind of like a confirmation that what you said in your GFSA is accurate.
sorry, I'm kind of scooting ahead because some of my slides are out of order, but
as I said, the teacher of the gifted interview, we will be interviewing teachers of the gifted, and that will vary. Sometimes there's only one teacher of the gifted, sometimes there's a bunch of them. And we will also be reviewing the regular education teacher of the students whose files we are reviewing. And it would be at least one regular education teacher for each of those children.
And I would say that the teacher of the gifted interview will be based on the files. So because the questions, as you look at that interview section, are really about what are the services that you as a gifted support teacher is providing to that particular child. So the questions are very student specific. The regular education teacher interview is also very student specific. So when you're building your schedule for the interviews, if you have a student who's strong in math and their GIEP has specially designed instruction in math, don't give us the social studies teacher to talk to. We want to talk to the math teacher who's actually has a responsibility within the GIEP in providing services to that student. And again, you know, those files are the names that you're being sent at the beginning of the year. So a careful review of those files and looking to see where in those files what teachers are actually providing service or facilitating those services. Those are the educators that we want to speak to, because the interview questions are very student specific. We're not looking for general overview kinds of information.
However, if the teacher of the gifted has 5 students, we probably will not interview that person 5 times.
Mm-hmm.
We will we will talk about each one of the students, give the names, and ask if there is a difference in the answer for other students.
And we will try to spread that out between elementary, middle, and high school.
The student interview is really quite short, and it only takes a few minutes. Sometimes parents will ask that their child not be interviewed. That's very, very rare. We get very good information from students, and it's very important that we interview students. And we interview students even if they're in kindergarten through high school, unlike special ed where they start in high school. So we do interview all of the students whose files were being reviewed. The parent phone interview, I mentioned that before. We do that usually either the afternoon of the first day, some will be done. If not, the rest will be done the next day. Or if some of the peers do not get the parent, I sometimes call them myself after the compliance monitoring visit is over, because with only a sample of 10, I think it's very important that we hear from the parents. And don't get upset if you have a parent that wants to complain a little, because I always say I don't think I'm done yet if somebody hasn't whined a little bit. But we do also get very positive things from parents. And many of them are thrilled to death with what's going on in gifted ed. So I think the parent phone interview is extremely important. Classroom observations. Used to say these were optional. They're not optional with me. I think classroom observations are very, very important. Now, we do not have a form that we fill out on classroom observations. We want to observe gifted students in gifted education classrooms or in regular education classrooms because we want to see what's going on with gifted education students. I think that's a very important part of the audit because it gives me a feeling for what's going on throughout the state and also in your district. So we will ask that you set up classroom observations. I always do classroom observations. Sometimes the peer monitors do, and sometimes they don't. It depends on the time factor.
And I think it's also important to note that, again, like that example we mentioned earlier, if you have a student whose GIEP is only addressing math strengths, we'd really like to see that student in the math classroom. So, you know, being strategic and providing lots of detail about the student and what kind of services we can expect to see evidence of are really helpful.
These are, there. You see 7 items there, but the first 6 are what we call the gifted facilitated self-assessment areas that you should have a folder for. You should have a folder on comprehensive plan and policies, a folder on personnel, and in that folder you should put the last 2 years of staff development for gifted with agendas and sign-in sheets. Special ed dual exceptionalities. I will ask to review the folders of students with dual exceptionalities. This is separate from those other folders. I want to see, if you have 3, at least 3. If you do not have 3, I'll see less. Then I will want to look at your screening and evaluation process. And gifted education placement. Now, when we talk about gifted education placement, as Tanya said, you know, we need to look at what the child's strengths are. And if a child has a strength in science, then there should be goals and short-term learning outcomes for science, also specially designed instruction for science. And the way we determine whether or not a child is placed appropriately is we look at those present levels of educational performance. That should give us a snapshot of what the child's strengths are. It should also give us the instructional level of that child. And so we don't just decide that a child is gifted and then put them in a program. We look at a placement that meets that child's needs, and we do that by determining the strengths. And then if you do a really good job on those present levels of educational performance, it's much easier for the teacher of the gifted to write goals and short-term learning outcomes based upon that child's unique strengths. And so what we look at for placement, if it's a fairly new gifted written report, we would look at that to see what the recommendations were from the school psychologist for what types of services that child needs. Does that child need enrichment, and in what content area? Acceleration, and in what content area? Or does the child need a combination of both? And if we can't get it out of the GWR, we get it out of the PLEP. And if it's not there, there's a real problem. But we want children to be placed according to what their unique needs are. We don't even like to use the word program because I like to say gifted education services. It's a continuum of services. It's not a program. Those days are gone when we plopped them in a program. Now we want to get them the services that they need.
And I would just say, just as a little bit of a commercial, we're trying very hard to make sure there is a gifted boot camp at all of the IUs where there are districts being audited. And the first day of boot camp will definitely touch on placement, both in what Chapter 16 says and what that placement can and should look like, you know, in the classroom setting. There won't be a lot of detail. It'll be broad strokes because it's a whole day that talks about, you know, the regulations and the procedures as well. But there's so many resources, not even, I mean, there's boot camp day one, but if you also look in the Gifted SAS PLC, there are whole webinars and recordings on enrichment and acceleration. There's a Gifted Boot Camp Day 2 that talks about what could enrichment look like. So, you know, if some of this you're saying, wow, we are pretty focused on a program, we haven't really unpacked, you know, placement real well, I would recommend that you take a look at those resources. Because perhaps that's something your team, as you review the Gifted Facilitated Self-Assessment, identifies as one of the areas that you need to work on.
And the next one is parental rights for gifted students. You should have a copy of your parental rights for gifted students in a folder. But the other thing you should do is make sure that the parental rights for gifted students are being implemented. It's not enough to just hand them to the parent, but are you doing what those parental rights say you should be doing? And the last one is student record review. That's where we just review those 10 records. And you will be given the names for 14 students. That's in case somebody moves or something, or for some reason those names they change. I would still have 10 to review. And I will choose the 10 out of the 14 when I get to the school district.
And the list of 14 comes right out of the PIMS data. That's where we're pulling that's where the names are being randomly pulled, so that when your PIMS person is reviewing the data, just as a reminder, if you have a student who's identified gifted, it has to be recorded as gifted and receiving services and gifted not receiving services in your PIMS data.
I have always told people to have a crate. I don't care if you have a crate or a box. Just have those file folders ready with the evidence in them. That's all I ask. And then I will be reviewing those. I will be reviewing those. It goes right along with reviewing the Gifted Facilitated Self-Assessment. The strategic plan is now called the comprehensive plan. We use the word strategic here because that's still what it says in Chapter 16. And as you can see, you must have the process for identifying students who are gifted and in need of specially designed instruction. It's two-pronged, just like in special ed. First, they have to be eligible through multiple criteria. Secondly, they have to demonstrate a need for specially designed instruction. And when I say demonstrate a need for specially designed instruction, it doesn't mean people sit in a meeting and say, I don't think this kid needs specially designed instruction, or I think this kid does. There should be evidence to support that. And then you have to have the gifted programming offered by the school district. Gifted education services is what I would call it. And you must have staff trainings about gifted during the past 24 months. You have to have any paperwork that documents that. It could be agendas, sign-in sheets, brochures, flyers, memos to teachers, could be newsletters, even if you're giving out a lot of information about gifted.
We've seen some very creative pieces of evidence There are some districts that record meetings in a podcast and they post them on their website. We've had districts create their own asynchronous online training that they open up to teachers. So any evidence that you have that you're providing professional development, not just to the gifted support teachers, but this is all personnel that would be involved or providing services or meeting with gifted support students. So that includes administrators, school psychologists, and probably the biggest group that we're missing a lot of times when we go into schools are the regular education teachers.
Chapter 16 does indicate that the persons to be trained are administrators, regular education teachers, teachers of the gifted, and support persons. Special education dual exceptionalities, we call these the 2E students sometimes. These are students who are gifted and also have a disability. There must be only one document, and that document is the individual education plan. And the individual education plan should include the information from the GIEP that is key information. There are 4 sections that are key. One is you have to have those present levels of educational performance. 2, you must have the goals / short-term learning outcomes. 3, you must have specially designed instruction for each goal. And 4, you must have support services. Sometimes when I go to districts, they think support services, they write down gifted support. That is not at all what we mean. A support service is something that helps the child to access their gifted education services. Just so you know up front, it could be transportation. That's not used very often because most children are not transported to gifted services. Could be psychological services. One thing that could almost always be on there that is almost always appropriate is collaboration between the general education teacher and the teacher of the gifted. Because with the revision of Chapter 16 in 2008, regular education teachers are required to be a part of educating gifted students. It's education for all students.
Okay, there we go.
You must provide a copy of the annual public notice, and the annual public notice may be, it may be in the newspaper, it may be on your website, it may be
Newsletter, calendar.
a lot of different places, but we must have a copy of that annual public notice. You have to provide a copy of the screening process and a copy of the evaluation process.
And I'm going to kick in here, and you'll notice that screening and evaluation are listed separately. One common area where we see districts needing to revise is in this area. They have what I affectionately refer to as a screvaluation. You can't really see where the screening ends and the evaluation starts, and really we should be able to, because the evaluation does not begin until the parent permission is completed and returned. But districts need to be actively screening all students to find those who may be in need of specially designed instruction for giftedness. So screening is kind of ongoing all the time, but the evaluation are those specific students who seem to pop out of the screening and require more data.
And screening does not require a consent form generally, but screening, when you're screening students, I think you should be thinking of trying to include students, not to screen them out so that they don't have to go to a full evaluation. That's a problem in some of our districts. They want to screen as many kids out so that they don't have to test. And that's very unfair to the students and their parents.
Okay. We did talk about this a good bit. I just want to say, you know, when you talk about policies and procedures for gifted education placement, if you're trying to, as a district, decide whether or not a child is in need of acceleration and what that acceleration should look like, you're not required to have acceleration guidelines. But it might not be a bad idea as you work through this process, if you don't have acceleration guidelines or protocols in place, you may want to start thinking about them in order to help teams make decisions about providing specially designed instruction to students.
And I think when we talk about policies, the policies should be fairly current. I went to a district and they gave me one from 1998. I made them redo that. But I mean, the policy must include class size and caseloads for gifted students. And the Pennsylvania School Boards Association, many of the policies are through the Pennsylvania School Boards Association. But it needs to be current, and it needs to include the components that have to be in there. You need to show documentation that the procedural safeguards are shared with parents. As of July 1, everyone is now to be using the new forms, which took a while to get out, but they are out and everyone is expected to use the new forms. And there is a place to document that the parental rights were shared with the parents.
Yep, I believe it's on the permission to evaluate, the invitation to participate in the gifted team meeting, and the notice of recommended assignment. So there are 3 places where, as a district, you can be documenting that you have shared the procedural safeguards with parents.
These are the documents in the student record review that we look at. We must have the permission to evaluate / reevaluate. It has to be the most recent one. With gifted students, sometimes the most recent permission to evaluate might be when the child was in 1st grade and the child's in the 11th grade. But we just need the most recent one. There are not a whole lot of reevaluations done in gifted, but if there is one, we want to see the reevaluation also. The gifted written report should be the most recent one. And the invitation to participate in the gifted team meeting should be for the last 2 years. So we want 2 of those. The GIEP, the last 2 years, so that we can see, make sure that the GIEP was done within the timelines, within one year.
And we can see if growth is being projected in the goals.
That's true. Then the notice of recommended assignment, those should be, you should have a NORA at the end of each GIEP meeting, and we will want to see the most recent, preferably for the last 2 years. And in the NORA, we have been trying to encourage districts to be more specific in the NORA, to put not just gifted support, but to put whether the child is getting enrichment and what content area, acceleration, what content area, or a combination of both.
And I do want to do a little commercial. The gifted liaisons across the state have recorded short podcasts that are in the SAS PLC that give guidance on how to complete each of these forms, so that you can look at those ahead of time or have your staff review them in preparation for this visit.
And we prefer that these documents be given to us the last 2 invites, last 2 GIEPs, last 2 NORAs, most recent PTE, most recent GWR, but take out all the extraneous other stuff. So basically, we look at the data in the file reviews and we analyze it, and then we as a team discuss what we found. And we identify any problem areas in each of the forms. As a matter of fact, we also have note sheets that we use. If there's a citation on any particular area, I ask that it be listed on a note sheet. And I think we are also going to put it by forms too, so we can see if there's any particular form which is causing more problems. Because when I come back to review, then I could tell you, okay, I'm just going to be looking at GIEPs and NORAs, or I'm just going to be looking at permission to evaluate in GIEPs. Almost always I'm looking at GIEPs. That's almost a given. Does anybody have any questions so far?
Looks like they're all still with us. Okay, so this is just, we know that you're going to submit a copy to Dr. Pearl ahead of time, but make sure you have a copy for yourself so you have it to reference during either the entrance or exit conference.
Your superintendent received a letter with the dates for the monitoring, and the superintendent will be notifying the school board of these dates and the administrative staff, and they probably will do that at the beginning of school if they haven't done that already. These are the final preparations you need to do.
These aren't necessarily specific to the items in the monitoring, but these are some things that we have found over the years that if the school districts do ahead of time, it makes for a smoother on-site.
Right, and you are being monitored for special ed at the same time as you're being monitored for gifted. It may not be the same day, but it's the same week. And we try to work with special education, and sometimes we've been in the same room. It's probably best if we have separate rooms, but we'd like to have a room to work in with copiers and telephones, and we'd like the folders and documents placed in the order that you see with the bullet number 2 there. I already mentioned get rid of extraneous documents. And then just have that crate with all the backup information, and determine where you want to meet for the entrance and exit conference. The exit conference we cannot determine ahead of time because we never know for sure how long it's going to take in any given district. But the entrance conference, I like to have it at 9, but if special ed has already grabbed 9 o'clock, I probably will work with them. We will need student schedules and teacher schedules and directions to the schools so that we can conduct interviews with teachers and students.
We can drive ourselves, or if you have somebody that wants to run us to the different buildings, that's convenient as well. Either way.
And then I had mentioned before having some information for peer monitors to call parents, like what's the best time, work, home, cell phone. And with teachers, we'll just be going to their schools and to their classrooms. And it's in terms of substitutes. Some of you may want to hire a substitute, but we try to not add to the expense. It's not necessary to hire a substitute, but if you want to, that's okay with us. Sometimes it's somebody in the school can go ahead and cover. You can figure that out however you want, but we don't encourage hiring subs, and we try not to disrupt instruction as much as we can.
I think at this point, I'm going to unmute all of you, which means we will all be able to hear all of your background. And if you want to, once I unmute everyone, if you don't want to speak, you just need to manually mute your own microphone. But this is an opportunity for the whole group to have a discussion, for you to ask any specific questions or review anything that you're not sure about. So I'm going to unmute everyone. And if you don't want to be heard, you can mute yourself. But do you have any questions?
Hi, this is Sean Spro. I don't have any questions at this point. It sounds like it's been 6 years, but it sounds like it's very similar to the same process for special education compliance monitoring, which is a good thing. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like the process is largely, the FSA, the file reviews, the interviews, even the process that day sounds like it's very similar to what we go through for compliance monitoring for special education.
It was actually modeled after special education, and this year is the first year we're changing it a little bit, but not so much the process as some of the, like the compliance monitoring manual. We have made some changes in that. We've made some changes in the interview questions, but the process is still very much the same. We're still doing many of the same things. But I think the gifted FSA that we have developed, it is, it's more open, it's like questions that are aligned to each part of Chapter 16. And I think it will actually be an easier gifted FSA than the one in the past and more meaningful. And your district, I think, will be the very first one to experience it.
I only quickly clicked over to the website, and it may have been there and I missed it, but the actual FSA document, is that available on the website? That's available now?
On the PDE SAS
Portal.
They're not on PDE's website yet. We're just finalizing some grammar issues and some citations. But the draft copies of them are in the SAS PLC Gifted and Accelerated Learning Community. Were you here for that part?
Yeah, I have the, I actually went to the page. I went onto the portal. That's why I'm looking at that page incorrectly. But I have the, one of my tabs here.
Okay.
I have the directions that tells you how to log on to the portal to get that document.
Yep, they're there.
And I want to say that the better you do on that gifted FSA in taking it very seriously and filling it in comprehensively, the fewer questions I'll have to ask you when I get there. So it's just a good idea to do your best on that gifted FSA. And like I said, I think this one is easier to fill out than the last one.
Your gifted liaisons are available for support. Some have asked me, what is our role in this? As a gifted support liaison at Capital Area, when my districts went through the compliance process, I met with them ahead of time and was kind of a facilitator walking through the self-assessment. So I would encourage you to make contact with your gifted liaison in your IU. So if you don't know who that is, I can definitely share that information with you, or it's on PDE's website.
Okay.
Any other questions? Well, we knew it wasn't going to take 3 hours, but we set aside 3 hours just in case. This will be recorded, and we'll post it up so that you can listen to it again if you need to review anything. Unless there are any other closing comments, we're actually done.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Have a nice day, everyone.
Thank you. You too.